Going? All right, just make sure that we're fully recording. Good evening, happy July 5th to everyone. Before we get started, I would like to, only the fire chief is here with us, Chief Ellis, but I do want to make sure that everyone, all our city departments know how grateful we are for all the hard work that they did over the past weekend. Lots gets taken for granted in Webster Groves over the 4th of July, and I hope everybody knows that we as a council aren't doing that. So thank you for all your hard work. So anything that anyone wants to review on the regular agenda?
Too long.
Yeah, don't review it, especially don't add anything. All right, how about updates? Emily?
No updates for me.
No updates, Mayor?
Nothing, Madam Mayor.
I have an update.
Don't worry, I do too.
Okay. So the sustainability meeting, commission met last week and had several agenda items. One of which, or one of the main ones, was a discussion about Forever Webster Groves, which is a sustainability plan. And they've been tasked with identifying their priorities for implementing this plan. They received, as you remember, a budget from council or from the city and we approved the American Rescue Plan Fund for some initiatives. So now that the budget process is complete, we as a council need to review that plan and decide how we want to move forward with the plan before we figure out how to implement it. So I wanted to request that we put that on a work session, on the calendar for the work session. September would be the earliest that they would be ready to tell us more.
Okay. Do we have, is there anyone who objects, or who else would like to put this on the work session agenda? Okay.
Yeah.
So it looks like we have at least 4 or 5. Okay, so Marie, we will make a note, and Katie, that we will get this scheduled for September, October, hopefully.
Great, thank you.
All right,
Thank you. And that's all I have.
Mr. Smith.
Just two updates. The Police Community Engagement Board did meet, although we didn't have a quorum. They did take the opportunity to just open up discussions and talk freely. Naturally, they didn't make any decisions, but they are thrilled that they have a full board body, and then the student liaison, Sloan Carfield, is going to join them probably at the end of September. And so Captain Perks was there filling in for Chief Curtis, and gave an excellent review of the policy procedures of the proactive preventive measures that they take in active shooting. And so the board is looking to see how they can wrap that discussion into a community discussion. So they're moving in that direction. So to the keep all my organizations separate here. The Webster Rockhill Ministries, we had the trivia night last Friday. It was a success. I think we had over about 110 people there. So we had a really good time. It was really, really nice to get the community back together and have some fun. So I'm sure we'll receive some communications from the director, Minister Derek Bastian, on how grateful ministry is to for all the attendance and support that was given to him on Friday night.
Emerson, roughly how much do they raise with that?
For this one, I should know because I just gave a report this morning. After expenses, it was around $4,600. Yeah, so
That's almost as much as pre-COVID.
yeah, and you had the different things, the 50-50 heads and tails and all that, but they always gave the money back to the ministry. So we're getting ready to start our next fundraiser. So you'll be hearing more about that probably the next month. That's it.
Sarah?
Nothing for me.
Nothing.
Feel like there should be something, but nothing.
Okay, I'm going to make up for it then. To
All right.
all of you. Well, actually, Katie, let me ask you first. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Do you have anything?
No, I'm good.
Everybody else is going with the flow. You gonna bail me out, Eric, and have something?
Madam Mayor, I do not.
All right then. Okay, so I had a very good meeting with Mike Travellini, who is the mayor of Shrewsbury, and to begin discussions about are there things that we can collaborate on that help both of our cities? And I know that we will have another meeting, both the two of us with the city administrator from Shrewsbury and Marie as well. I did a Muni League parliamentary procedure training. I don't know whether it's going to help, but I hope it will help some. And then Eric and Marie and I had a really good meeting with State Senator Doug Beck, State Rep Sarah Unsicker, and State Rep Joe Dahl to begin forging a closer relationship with them and work that we can do, especially given that the state has a fair amount of their own ARP money around, and all three have pledged to help us figure out if there are places that we can apply for some of that money and to really keep in contact as opportunities come up. And to be honest, Doug Beck's already said he's identified one that should be coming forward in July. So we'll keep that relationship going. And to her credit, Representative Unsicker, even though as of the election will no longer represent us, said she'd be happy to do anything she can for us as a city, even after that time. So good for her. The boards and commission subcommittee met. See, some of you were there and you didn't even take the opportunity.
Oh, I just knew you was gonna-
You have the update.
We're going to talk most about what we did during that meeting in our topic, so I'll skip that. The Arts Commission met this morning, a couple of events to alert you to. July 15th is the Burr Oak Roots concert. So it's focusing on roots music. So that's the 15th under the Burr Oak in Larson Park. The 27th is Piano Fest just next door at the Masonic Temple. And then they are working on the Fall Lifetime Achievement in the Arts Awards. I got my first report from Ron Zager and the Webster Gross Historical Society. And he wanted to make sure that we knew on July 11th, Javier Mendoza will be having a concert as well. There is no shortage of music for you in the next several weeks in Webster Groves. So please enjoy it. And then I also had the pleasure of helping dedicate a peace pole at Epworth, which was great, and got to talk with some of the students there, which was really rewarding. That's it for me. So I think
Mayor, I
we're,
do have one other
yeah,
item.
there we go.
Thank
See?
you. I forgot that Leslie Bell did meet with
Oh,
that old
right.
Community Baptist Church. It was a very good turnout. That was sponsored by the Police Engagement Board, Alliance Federation of Dignity, and the Old Community Baptist Church. So we had a good representation. He spoke really well, kind of nothing specific, just gave an idea how his office works and how they prioritize what they're going to do. So how they do things. So that was good to be there listening to him.
Good, that's great. Anything else that got spurred out of your memories? All right, topics. We're going to start with strategic planning. So Dr. Peoples, the
Yes,
floor is
ma'am.
yours.
Actually. Eric or Jenny, are you loading? Thank you. All right. So I'm excited that we are embarking on strategic planning, but in order to do that, I need some parameters, guardrails, if you will, from council on how we do that. Jenny goes to the next one. Eric's doing. Okay. So in considering strategic planning, and we all have hopefully good stories to tell about strategic planning, whether it be from other organizations, volunteer groups, work, and we all have bad stories to tell about strategic planning, and that they're, processes that just go nowhere, last forever. You create a document and it goes on the shelf. We don't want to do that. And so as I was thinking about the work that we've already done over this past year, which it's amazing to me, we've already collected a ton of data, a ton of community input, a ton of staff input. That is not to say that there's not more to collect, but we already have a really good baseline or a launching pad. We're not starting from zero. And so we've done council SWOT survey, We did the same thing with directors and assistant directors, yielded a lot of great information. We've done the business development survey, balancing act fiscal year 23 budget survey, ARP survey. Council also had a retreat It's been some time ago, but you may recall we had a retreat. We've done the sustainability survey, and we've done a myriad of DEI surveys, both internal and external, focus groups and interviews. So we have a lot of information to build from. You can go to the next. And then on the 6-1 meeting, council also talked about priorities, and these aren't in any particular order. So along with the survey data, that we can also glean a lot of information from the community and what the community's priorities are. We also have these lists here of council priorities. And so I would suggest that these feed into the strategic planning that we have. Not to say those are all the ideas and things that are of importance, but we have a really good place again to start from. So what I needed to know from you all is what you're envisioning in strategic planning. And I can take those other documents that I talked about and try to synthesize and get you all some information, so to speak, to come forward with that. But are you envisioning a full process where we're redoing mission, vision, values? Or are you happy with those? And this certainly didn't have to be the last conversation on this, but are you envisioning a process where we do all of that again? What's the duration of the strategic plan? Is it 2 years? Is it 5 years? Are you looking for a more long-term plan? I would recommend that we're looking for a strategic plan that would align with what we set for some of our budget priorities, aligning with fixing the structural deficits and then seeing where our goals are. So a more shorter term to mid-range strategic plan. Not to say you can't have some long-term goals, but to really focus on where we're at now, because as you know, and if you had an opportunity to review the article that I sent earlier today, it's turbulent times. Organizations, businesses, regardless of industry, very few are planning for the next 10 years, where they're really looking at what's in front of us now. And of course, what do we aspire to be? So I'd like some feedback on the duration of the strategic plan and then your timeline. Is council wanting this to be, a relatively short process? Again, not saying that it would be rushed because we already have so much information. Or are you wanting a 6-month process, a year-long process, or anything in between those lines? What is it you're really looking for? And then, of course, a council ambassador champion, that also doesn't have to be decided tonight. This isn't something that you would probably want a liaison for, but who's going to be that council person that is, people are either not responding to questions or timelines, or perhaps the debate about what it looks like should go on too long. Who's that council champion that's going to step in and to help herd cats? So I don't see anybody raising their hand yet, but.
Emerson.
Well, I hear Neil, he might be volunteering,
Yeah, I
I'm
know.
not sure.
I saw him raise his hand.
And then and of course, I'm gonna be your staff champion. I would help lead this along the way and keep everybody on track. I also wanted to ask about a strategy expert, whether that's a consultant, whether it's somebody local, in terms of how we do that. And I'll bring up the city of Maplewood, and I spoke with Mayor about this. I know that they recently had a retreat. I believe it was a weekend retreat. They did have someone that helped facilitate and lead that. Theirs was not so much for strategic planning. They had other goals in mind, but it could be something like that, where we have somebody for a weekend. So I'd like to know, or whatever the time frame is that council talks about, how do you envision that person? Do you think that you need that person? I would say to a degree, yes, because in some ways, and again, I can help lead a lot of that, but in some ways there has to be that honest broker, if you will, that will say, well, that's just not realistic. This is what we have to do. So how do we do that? And then meeting preferences. I know I'm throwing quite a bit out there, but as I think about a timeline and take the information that I hear from you all tonight, is this something that you all would want to do over a weekend? Do you want to meet in the evenings? I know meeting during the day can be very difficult for some of you. So how do you want to set that time aside? And consider that as you talk about the time frame, excuse me. Because there's no point in saying we want to be fairly aggressive and do this in 6 months if realistically we can't meet during that time frame. So that, Madam Mayor, was all. I wanted to throw all of that out there and see what sticks.
Well, can we keep the questions up there, please? Because I think that's probably the best for us to move along here. So I think this is one of those things where I think everyone's going to have to express an opinion on what they want us to do. And maybe we start with kind of the scope. Are we doing a full on? I mean, I guess the scope and duration go together. So I'm opening the floor for, let's have that conversation first.
How old is our most recent strategic plan?
Yeah.
Like ever?
Yeah.
We have a
I mean,
comprehensive plan
Yeah.
that's not quite the
Hasn't
same.
been updated.
So we don't really
Yeah.
have something that we can like update from, or like, we're starting from
Ground zero.
ground.
Oh, the
Yep.
comprehensive plan basically just has to do with land use.
Exactly,
I'm thinking- so-
exactly. Land use in business districts especially, yeah.
Correct, yeah.
Basically saying we want to stay a bedroom.
So
I didn't hear what you said.
I said it basically says we want to remain a bedroom community.
Or the
The comprehensive plan, it hasn't been updated since 78,
2017.
2017. Oh, it was updated after that. It
Well,
was real
the-
minor though, wasn't it?
yeah.
I mean, it didn't
Mel-
do
They
much.
were kind of melded together to make the 2017 comprehensive plan.
But can we
But
agree though
it's-
that we're pretty much starting from scratch?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that makes me feel like the
Yes.
scope is probably bigger than it would be if we were starting with something that we'd already had, maybe. I guess it depends on, I feel like there's a balance between how broad the scope is and how swiftly we want to get started working on acting on the strategic plan.
Well, and one of
I don't know the
things-
answer to that, but
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I mean, but one of the things you said, which makes sense to me, that we need to align it with the timeline that we suggested for balancing our budget. I think we said almost 5 years where we were, what was, I forgot what it was, but
We've got a 3-year plan.
a
in
3-year
terms of-
plan for
but-
that.
And that's pretty aggressive as well. But,
Yeah.
you know, the neat thing about a strategic plan in my mind is that it should be a living document. So I certainly don't want to put it on the shelf, but if council sets a 2-year plan, for example, there's nothing to say that we can't revisit it. And I would also hope as we go along that we're looking at benchmarks. We would pull out the strategic plan at certain milestones, whether that's 3 months, 6 months, and we would revisit them as a council in a work session and see where we're at and what have we been successful at, what are the barriers? So it is a living document.
So it wouldn't have to be 3 years because we said we wanted to have the budget balanced by 3 years, but it makes sense that it needs to at least incorporate that time, right?
And before, I know, David, you're getting ready to speak. Before you do, Marie sent us today Rethinking Strategic Planning, which I read this afternoon. I think it's critical that we think about this, especially given how rapidly things are changing now. When you think about planning, you need much more flexibility, I think, than what at least I sometimes think of in terms of strategic plans.
I was just gonna ask, in regards to figuring out the scope of our strategic plan, what's our objective in doing the strategic plan? What do we want to accomplish? Because I think that would help determine the scope of the strategic plan. Is the objective merely just to balance the budget going forward after 3 years? Because that seems like we're already well on our way at figuring out how to do that, or is it broader than that? And if that's the case, obviously it's going to take more time.
Fiscal responsibility is always a part of strategic plan. So I think I never see that one disappearing out of our process. I think we have enough items listed of things we want to do. Housing, balance the budget, those things to work on, to put in the strategic plan, because that's like, there's a living document. It goes on and on and on. But to keep ourselves in line with where we want to go, it's always a good practice to look at our mission and vision. Sometimes our mission and vision can be so broad that we can never do it all anyway. And look at where we are now and what's our primary reasons. I think now we're focusing on fiscal responsibility and infrastructure. That's just where we at. It includes a lot of stuff to get done here. And I wouldn't want to get too broad because I'm in favor of short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals. But as Marie mentioned, I think we got a lot in front of us to take care of these short-term goals with the fiscal responsibility to do a 3-year plan. And as we move through our process, meeting after meeting, we think of something, you can just add that to the list of what we want to do. And when it's time, we can move it to the top and start working on it. But I do think the mission and vision should be reviewed. Not saying going into detailed changes, but make it clean and precise. So community will know exactly where we're going in the city.
I have no problem reviewing the mission, vision and values. I think that makes sense. It's been a long time. It seems to me, based off of the last slide, which details, potential items, we're already well on our way of looking at those things. So is the purpose of the strategic plan merely to compile all of the work that we're doing in one document for ease of reference for residents and for ourselves? Or is it actually to have concrete objective goals that are new that we haven't discussed yet, that aren't necessarily within our housing discussion or within our old Webster redevelopment area discussion?
I think it's a combination of those, right? And it's fleshing out what we have and making it actionable. Like, I mean, I think that's part of it too, is putting in place some, the plan part of strategic plan, right? Is to actually have some steps figured out.
And I think that sounds great. It seems to me it appears that is adding additional work that is unnecessary. In other words, if we're going to talk about housing, let's talk about housing. Why do we need to include it in a strategic plan? What does the strategic plan add, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. I'm all for talking about housing. I'm all for talking about stormwater, but what does it include? What does it add to the city or to us or to the residents by including it within a strategic plan? We can have goals within housing during our conversations and work session and council session. I'm not sure exactly how this, other than creating additional work for both us and staff, what the strategic plan actually accomplishes.
That's why I think, I mean, I'm gonna pick up where you're left off, and that I am seeing a lot of success with, like the article said, I was like, oh, that's cool, it's written in paper. The whole idea of taking a tactical approach, which we've kind of started doing already with the sustainability plan. And, they're looking at what can they do next to move forward with that. So those are tactics that they have started implementing. We have done some housing things. So we've kind of picked away at the different things. And I think as we start getting some success and some data behind it, then we can kind of form a vision. I'm sure we can find common themes and alignments that would help create a new vision for us, rather than creating this huge umbrella and we don't know what we're catching in it.
Well, and that's, I think the problem that I'm struggling with is seems very amorphous right now, right? Like
Right.
it seems like we have this notion that we want to create difference or change within Webster Groves, but we don't know what that difference or change is from an actionable standpoint, except for when we look at the individual items, we do know, like for instance, in housing or the redevelopment area.
DEI,
Exactly.
we're kind of got these little sections.
Yeah. So what does this, what does the strategic plan process bring to the table that we don't already have in place or that we're not already doing?
It brings it all together. It makes it like possible to kind of look at the next few years as a jar to be filled, and to take what we have that we know we want to do and figure out how to piece things together. Like, I mean, that's what it means to me, but I don't know. I mean, and it's reestablishing the vision. It's not to say recreating, but making sure that, kind of what you're planning out connects back to what your goal for the whole community is at heart. Like, I mean.
It seems to be more form over substance, though.
Have you
Well,
had a good,
so-
a good experience ever with strategic planning?
I have, and I have no problem doing strategic planning. I've always struggled with strategic planning from a democratic standpoint, from when you're looking at a government, because we change and the voters make the determination of where the vision of the city goes to a certain degree. Obviously, we lead in that enterprise, but we aren't necessarily the conduits or the people that are doing the change. It really comes from the people, and that can change. And that makes me think, oh, strategic planning at a democratic level is much more difficult because it is much more susceptible to change on the short-term basis than if you were in an institution or in a corporate entity. Now, I recognize that other municipalities throughout the region and in the country do strategic planning. I just want to know what our objective is, or try to figure out, because that will help frame my understanding of where we go with the scope and also what the end result of the strategic plan should be, rather than us trying to say, oh, our objective will be determined after the strategic plan is already accomplished.
We
So-
do have, one more thing, please. No, we do have stuff, information from the people. We have all the surveys on so many categories. And they were very helpful. I mean, they're very concrete. There's a lot of good ideas in some of them. So I think we've heard from the people and we need to make some structure for it. to
Yeah.
Work.
Were you gonna go, Karen? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
what in my mind, there's like, without being too broad, there is two things that we got to do. If we're talking to where we start from, because if we're talking about fiscal responsibility, we're talking about budgeting and we're talking about revenue. And so I think anything else that we can do on that page has to do with how we manage our budget and what we do to address and change our revenue stream. And so to me, if we don't have the revenue. to
Eric,
do
will you
these
go
things-
to the list for us? I apologize for
Mhm.
interrupting. The list of council priorities. Thank you. So go ahead, Karen. I
So
apologize.
that's what I'm just saying. It seems to me that that's the big place that we have to start from. Because because even when we're talking about, we got to get these two things in place in order for us to do any of that. And so what does that look like? So when we talk about, what does strategic planning look like in my mind? The overarching approach is how do we address fiscal responsibility, which has to deal with how we change how Webster addresses revenue.
So the thing that I did very directly answer your question, if I were setting this up all by myself, what would my objectives be? Number one is that's a list that could take us 3 years easy.
Yeah.
So it's prioritization.
Mhm.
Number two, and it closely related is we've collected a lot of public input, but we've never matched the public input with that list in a way that says, this is what the public wants most, or this is what the public means when they say Old Webster redevelopment area. So the strategic plan, I think, will help us narrow the definitions of what those issue areas are. And then I think also we're going to learn that there are places where we don't have public input that we actually want public input, and it may give us some opportunities to ask for that input. So that would be my answer to the objectives question. I think I can't remember who said it. It's maybe Sarah. It's as much about organizing and making sure we are in step with the public, going back to that democratic theory idea, as it is coming up with anything new.
Just finishing what we already started. Because you look at that list, DEI, we're on our way, and how we incorporate DEI in what we do here at city, in the city council. So that's going to hit every subject item up there. We put money, I believe, in the budget for sustainability plan. We put money in for the traffic. So those are priorities. We saw fit that we put resources to make that go. So what do we want to see done with that? And the same thing so what's left is really just housing, stormwater, everything else we're working on.
Okay, how about if we're not getting to a decision, so I'm going to reframe the question. How about if we go back to what's our time frame for when we want this plan to cover? Do we agree that it maybe should end about the time our effort to balance the budget ends? Because that would be a good opening for a new planning process that really understands what our landscape is, or the more traditional longer duration.
Short.
Sure. Like I said, since we put.
But
those
I'm wondering if I'd have to have my memory refreshed about the budget, but I also think we should relate it to, our 2 and 4 year cycles. Think about that.
2 and 4 year cycles of our,
Being on council.
so I'm not sure we can do that, right? By the end, let's assume that we finish this in 6 months. I don't know whether that's realistic or not. If that's right, we'll be halfway through the first year of our 3-year process, right? So I don't know. So that would be a plan for about 18 months before the next election. And that seems awfully short to me.
And I hear two questions. How long do we want to take to complete the plan? and how long do we want the plan to cover?
Yeah, and
Right.
I hope we'll answer the second one, because I think that determines how we think about the first one, right? So everybody over here seems to see short. We'll have to define what short is. I didn't look over here to see what anyone said in terms of duration of the plan.
I mean, I think that that kind of 3-year, get the balance back, budget back on track milestone is a solid one to have. There might be things that we're going through that are going to take more than 3 years, and we could maybe have like a, 3-year, like a 5-year milestone or something too. But I think that the 3-year one is a good main one to have.
And again, remember, 3 years by the time we finish this is really 2.5, probably, if we're really aligning with the fiscal plan.
That sounds reasonable.
Because we're already late. I mean, we should have had our plan to go into this new budget year to make sure something worked. So we're gonna look at the strategic plan, maybe get it running September, October, and then we're ready back into the budget process all over again. So we kind of bite off what we can, finish what we can with those items up there. And then that strategic planning should be between January and May when we are doing the budget all over again, because what we find that's important, we put resources to it.
Okay.
And that's what we did. For the sustainability, the walkability, all that good stuff. So.
Okay, so I'm going to suggest that we have consensus that is a 2.5 to 3 year duration of the plan. Do we want to reconsider mission, vision, and values as part of that process?
So what I was going to say about that is be new. It would be helpful, I think, for me to have a better idea of like a better grounding of where our boundaries is the right word, but like what's in scope as for a council and for, city government as an entity, council and staff versus the community, right? Because there are a lot of things that we want to do as a wide community that aren't within our purview as a council or as a city government. And maybe that's something that we can delineate a little bit in the mission, values, vision is what is in our wheelhouse? What are we going to be working on versus what do we maybe support the community working on, but it's not something that we're going to tackle because we can't or don't have the bandwidth or whatever.
Right.
I think we should work on some of these other entities. And I think a new mission, vision, and values will grow from that. I think we'll be better able to inform those.
Yeah, I almost feel like we got to back into it.
I think
Let it evolve
backwards,
out.
period. You need to have your vision and your mission before you start on what you want to work on. The mission and vision, it like this, that's a living statement. It can change but if whatever our vision is, we need to state that to the public. This is where we are going. Otherwise it's not matching anything. You don't have to spend 2-3 months on a vision statement. It's just something quick, clean, and to the point of what we're here for. Pretty much like our campaign promises. I said I want to do fiscal responsibility. I want to make sure that everybody's heard and all those good things. And somebody leading that conversation, you just look at what we have, tweak it, and then move on.
Sarah, thoughts?
It feels like opening a can of worms a little bit to just start to like redo all of it, but and I don't know a lot about how they were crafted to begin with personally. So so I don't know what the community expectation is about how like static they are, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I do think we need to know what our values are before we kind of start strategic planning. Like that makes sense to me as a process. And if that means we kind of read through everything again and decide if we need some updates, I don't know that we have to overhaul everything entirely, I guess.
We might be able to back into our vision, values, mission from looking at the list we already have. And then just, summarizing
I
that
don't want to
somehow.
get waylaid
Right.
with
Okay.
the
Yeah.
heavy lift of
So
rewriting those things.
It sounds to me like we need to review them to make sure they're consistent with what we are looking at right now, but there's no appetite for going through the whole process of retooling everything. Is that a fair?
Right, because I think that as long as we have that and I appreciate that it's a growing, changing thing, but it's whatever time period we set for completing this, 6 months, whatever, we have that by the end of that period of time.
Yeah.
To me, that makes sense. What I don't want to do is delay progress, getting stuck on what that needs to be. That's what I mean by we can back in my
Okay.
mind, we can back into it as long as we have it complete by the time we finish that initial 6 month, whatever.
Well,
That
maybe
is-
that means we sort of bookend the discussion, right? We
Mhm.
review it, see where we
Mhm.
are, and then at the end, we go back and say, all right, are we still consistent with what we've done?
I think that's fair.
Okay, number 3, what's our timeline? I'm really trying to get a solid answers.
It sounds like 6 months.
Is
So
this a
keep,
priority over, is this the priority?
so the last meeting when we discussed what people wanted to work on, this was the
This is
priority.
Okay.
Yeah. So keep in mind that we'll have at least one special meeting in August to do charter advisory review, charter review advisory board applications. So unless you want to do 2 special meetings in August, then we're already talking September. I'm not saying poo-poo to the 6 months, but we also need to be realistic.
Like, does the 6 months start from now and we're talking January, or does it start from September and we're talking March?
I mean, people need prep time too, right? So it's not like we could start tomorrow. We have, right, we need to have some things that have to be compiled, and if we are looking at outside resources, we have to look at availability of theirs.
Other comments? Shoot for starting in, say, early October with a 6-month window?
For strategic planning,
Yeah, or wait, or September with a 6-month window.
see September because if not earlier, because when you start going, they're going, management, I mean, administration is going to start going into the budget process probably in November.
It's always budget time.
Yeah, and it's always
It's a
budget time,
cycle.
and our goals or our plan should mirror back to the budget.
I understand. The problem is we are only having one meeting in August. We have a mandatory formation of the charter review advisory board. Sorry, I always get it mixed up. So you're going to hear me hesitate when I say it for a long time. We have a mandatory process for that that's going to take a significant amount of time. I don't see how we do this before September at the very earliest, and it's probably a special meeting in September. Do you think I'm wrong about that, Katie and Murray? In terms of our ability to, in meetings, actually get this
I
done?
think unless you want several extra special meetings, September, late September, October might be more realistic to start.
For me, I think if we dedicated a day, all our meetings are always 2 hours, maybe 3 hours. We might need a day of meeting together as a group and hashing out some of this stuff.
Okay, who feels like they can do that?
Like a weekend?
A day.
On a weekend?
Well, it's
Depends on
gotta
what
be a
day. I
weekend.
can't do it during the week.
Yeah,
period.
it's gotta be a weekend, given the makeup of council.
I can swing that.
Are we willing to commit to that?
Yeah.
Okay, should we try and schedule something for sometime in September?
Sure.
On the weekend. Does anyone have a religious objection to a Sunday? Should ask that right away too.
Yes.
I thought so too. I mean, I think it's important to acknowledge that. So, or, so a Saturday in September, if we can figure that out. So Katie, if you wouldn't mind polling, is that all right with you, Marie, as well? Sorry, I should have asked before I told her to poll or asked her to poll. I shouldn't tell you ever. I should always ask.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, so, oh, you were gonna say something else?
It's just, I think the day is doable. I would go back to how we're facilitating that. I'm also
Nice.
very willing to do some pre-work on that, whether it's around mission, vision, values. We'll throw this out there. Is it something worth a couple of you getting together on ahead of time to start crafting some of this and to bring some firmer ideas back for that day that's scheduled? It might help shore up some of the loose
Yeah,
conversation.
I sense a subcommittee coming up.
Yeah.
We can,
I agree with you, Marie. I mean, the
Yeah.
subcommittee for the commissions, I think we've got a lot done. And so now we're ready to talk about it in council. Yeah, subcommittee to look over or be ready to present something to council. as far as modified budget, mission, vision, values.
It seems to me that that we have a lot of this legwork already done, right? Like our budget, except for revenue, right, which I think is a huge topic of concern. The strategic plan is within the budget. And then when you look at housing, I mean, granted, we need to come back to it and discuss it even more and figure out where we can go, but we've already done a lot of the legwork. And like you said, we've already have the data. So again, it seems to me that all we are doing is repackaging that which we've already accomplished. Okay, so why would we repackage something?
I disagree with the repackaging because I don't think that we have systematically taken the public input that we've gotten and compared it to how we prioritize that long list, how we actually are thinking through how we define what some of these issues are. And
It's
so,
in disparate places.
And how to
Well,
put them
that's what I
into.
mean.
ti-
But
into
we've never
space
had
and
the
time. Like, there's-
conversations.
Right,
Yeah.
there's no like timeline to any of it. So like, I mean, I think we are in different places about strategic planning. Like, I don't know, I'm not
Is
sure how
there-
to convince you otherwise.
Oh, no, I'm not trying to convince you either, Sarah. I apologize. All I'm trying to do is understand what our objective is. And I'm not clear on that. So can I ask this question? Is there anyone on this council that's confused about where we are going on this council? It seems to me that we are all along the same page as to what we would like to accomplish in this city, both from a financial standpoint and also from a cultural standpoint.
Yes
So
and
as a
no.
result,
I mean, because I think we do surprise each other every now and then,
Mhm.
right? And I would expect that, like, but I think that's like, I don't think more collaboration is bad. Like, I think it's better the more time we have to kind of hash some of this stuff out and hear each other on it and not just assume or not think we already know kind of what the other person's gonna say. Like, I think, I mean, that's a fundamental part of me. I
Yeah.
like the collaboration, but I also understand that there's people who believe that's a waste of time, right? So I know we want to get to action, but I think this step is extremely important. And I think it is also extremely important in how we communicate with our residents and businesses. And something we haven't in the longer back history and coming up to now done such a great job of. And so recently we've done a little better, right? But we haven't given necessarily something cohesive to communicate to Jenny and the folks who were doing such a good job communicating for us. So like, I think we need to be able to do that. We need to be able to put an actual plan together and say, this is us, this is what we have, this is where we're going. And even if it's not, like down to the granular specific, at least it gives an idea. And especially because we heard so much in the surveys about how staff was unclear about goals and direction and the vision of the council and the community, and this pulls all that together. And I think it's valuable.
I could add to that. The community piece is fundamental. So I fully agree with all that. But in many ways, the strategic plan, whatever it looks like, even if it's just a one-page document, I'm not envisioning, which certainly council can, but I wasn't envisioning a big, huge, long documents because I think council is in a terrific place. The goals are pretty clear with some exceptions. It's the meat of how do we get there. But for me, it is a strategic plan for staff as well. And as much as I hope you all will be retained into the future, you're not promised. So how does staff pick up that document? What do we know are our marching orders? These are the goals of the city until council changes them and decides something different. So I see some value from that aspect.
Okay, I think. Do you have any-
oh, no, I'm
Okay.
sorry. I was just thinking.
Okay, that's fine. You looked like you're about to
No.
talk. So I think we've answered most of those things, except is this something that we want to get some outside assistance for? Do we want to do our one day and then decide whether we need some more help after that? What do you all think in terms of that question?
Well, I guess the question is, if not a strategy expert, who would be the leader and who would be willing to be that kind of person, that objective?
Will they guide us?
Third
through the
person.
process So we can make those decisions, this-
Right, but who, if we don't have that person, who among us
So
would be
up
doing
to,
that?
yeah, up to this point, Marie has done that in our earlier
Okay.
meetings. And so I think that would be the expectation, is that Marie would lead this if we did not hire an outside expert.
But it sounded like you had,
I thought I heard Marie say that it would be advantageous or
Up to a certain point.
advisory to have somebody else, objective third party, to pick that up.
I'm not arguing either side. I'm just giving you what our choices are and we need
Well,
to
I
make a
think
choice.
particularly if we're gonna take a day, I think there's a lot of value in having someone come facilitate a day. To help, even if, I mean, however that plays out, whether that means beyond a day, but I'm in favor of kind of a disinterested person to be there to facilitate.
And they're not there to judge if we should do housing first or sustainability first. They're just to help us compile our list and how we're gonna get to the information. I'm gonna do it.
So, yes.
So, yeah, so I'm gonna, well, go ahead, Dave.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you go
All
ahead.
right. I was just gonna say, I'm not in favor of spending taxpayer
Say what's
resources
gonna cost.
in order to facilitate the strategic plan, frankly, because I just go back to my initial objection is I just don't know what the objective is quite yet. And I think that we can do this in-house without spending taxpayer funds. So that's my 2 cents as of right now. I have no problem going through this process. And I will go into it with a good faith effort attempting to create a strategic plan. I just don't believe right now we have a detailed objective in order to give to the community to spend taxpayer funds.
That would have been my next question. What would that cost?
Well, I'll make this comment, Bud Balimo, that was his expertise and when he worked for General Motors. Strategic planning. He's actually laid out a strategic plan, I think some years ago. I know I've seen it. We can ask Bud. I bet you Bud would be glad to do it just for the sake of
Us finally having one.
yeah, because that's what he always pushed for that. He wanted that bad.
I'm good with Bud.
But it's so, but I'm not me saying he might not want to be paid. That's up to him.
Yeah,
but-
somebody for asking someone for
Has
free.
raised his hand online. I'm not sure if he wants to be volunteering.
Okay, let's let him have his comment if he has done such a thing.
Invite
Is he out there?
participants.
We should have, yeah, we should have known he was out there.
Well.
Can you hear me okay? I think
Yeah.
you have to stop sharing your screen. Oh, yeah, you got
Yeah,
it.
it's become pretty obvious to me that I can do a lot of good to help you guys get back on track here. So I'll be happy to volunteer to do anything, lead it, assist it, coach it, practice it, whatever you want.
Thank you, Bud. We appreciate that. Public servant as usual.
And while I'm at it, I think the priorities ought to be, just my pitch right here, the number one priority is what Karen was talking about, new revenue. That's got to be the top issue.
Okay,
do we-
but this,
How do we
this,
develop new revenue?
this begs a question though, because you have to agree to be an honest broker rather than someone who is advocating a particular position on what we're putting together, right? Because it has to be the plan of the sitting members of the council. And I know you know this inside and out. And so that's my question is, do you think you can do that without inserting your own opinions into the process?
Well, I already did as a citizen of Webster Groves.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
my comment. But no, I can guide you by the book.
All right, thank you very much, Bud. Okay, so do we have any other questions that need to be answered for you on this list?
I envisioned a lot this evening and
Uh,
I did not bank on that one.
Yeah, I hear you.
Subcommittee.
Oh, yes. Is there, who would like to be the council ambassador champions? We're gonna make that plural and work on a subcommittee to sort of help shape what this day is gonna look like.
I would.
I'll help.
Pam Emerson?
I guess I'm thinking, yeah, yes.
All right.
I'm happy to meet on this, the vision and mission and all that stuff. I'm not.
Yeah, I'm thinking more
I'm
than
not the
just a day. for
Cat
me, but I
corraller
don't
of
want to
this.
bite off too much.
Yeah. It's organization.
Okay.
So Sarah, do I hear you're happy to be on the subcommittee, but you don't want to be the corraller?
Correct.
I seem to be the one who has the most time to do the corralling, so I will do the corralling and Get that done.
With the subcommittee, we're gonna do our work and we're gonna close it. And we won't-
Yeah, this is a short-term one, right? Because it has to be done before whenever we meet in
Like
September.
those-
All right, anything else on this one?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so our other topic is the, see, I even have it written wrong in my notebook. Okay, the, Charter Review Advisory Board. So you got a memo, and I supplied you today with a different timeline. I had the wrong August meeting that we were taking off and what I wrote for you in the memo. So this is a revised schedule that allows our staff to actually have their week off instead of scheduling a special meeting during that week. It didn't seem fair to do that. So if you see, I'm going to assume you read it and you looked at the application, and we'll just do the action items. Does anyone have any comments on the application which has been attached or the introduction?
Is there a reason you don't want to have any kind of references on that application? to start?
Nobody ever calls the references. So we took them off as a subcommittee generally.
Okay,
And I think there should be a statement on there that we can ask
Yeah.
for them if we want them.
okay.
If people want references, we can easily put that back in.
I was just curious what the
But,
Rationale was.
but we asked either Katie or Jennifer, who said nobody ever calls them. So we're collecting information we don't use. Other comments?
I would just say that, the application that was created, we looked at other applications from other charter review boards, and this is pretty much the information they asked for.
Do you want to maybe just, again, say something on the application about the commitment to time? Like just say, I agree, I'm committing to time.
I think that's a good idea.
Oh, a box at the end, check this
Yes.
box. I
Yeah.
acknowledge that.
Yes.
Okay.
For this commission in particular.
Yeah.
May I suggest that that would be something like, I understand that this would be a significant commitment of time and I'm prepared to
Yes.
commit the time necessary to achieve the goals without saying exactly what that might mean, but
You just need to acknowledge that they're available.
Yeah, we can add that. Sorry, I'm writing. Okay. So I don't think we have to formally vote on this, but does anyone object to the application introduction as it stands now? All right, next one. So sort of like we did with the interviews for the council seat a few years ago. We had a standard set of questions. It seems like this is a time for another standard set of questions. So if you have questions that you think we should ask of these advisory board interviews, we need to have them for you. What's a reasonable time frame?
So the interview's going.
2 weeks?
Yeah, because the first round of interviews is August the 2nd,
Yes.
2 weeks. I agree with you.
Okay, so if you have questions that you think we should ask, please, within 2 weeks, you can send them to me. I'll compile them. Why don't you just copy Katie? So if I lose something, there's another place to find it.
I didn't see on the schedule, the session, like the info session.
So it's not on the schedule because we haven't scheduled it yet. We haven't found a night, but I assume it'll be the last week of July if we can work that out.
So it'll be before the interviews start.
Yes, it has to be, I think, before the interviews start. What are you laughing
Oh, this name. and-
Crab.
Oh, crap. They're just not rough.
It's better than crack, I guess.
Yeah.
Did have the thought, it's like, why
Panel.
don't we use commission
Glad it's not a
instead?
panel.
Is it a crab or is it a carb?
It's a crab. I kept doing a carb and they told me it was a crab. Oh, yeah.
What are the crap?
Even on the memo, I did it wrong, didn't I?
Well, I don't know if you did or not, but thank you.
Yeah, at the top here. You're right.
Yeah.
It's wrong.
Okay.
Okay. Did you have another thing that you were gonna? I thought you were about to say something.
No, no.
Okay, so then let's look at the timetable. Has everybody looked at the timetable? So if we approve the app, we just approved the applications, Friday, they will be ready to go and Jenny will start putting them in in our public interaction engagement places. Katie and I talked about running next week an ad in the Webster Kirkwood Times, just a small one so that people know they're available. And then we will probably set the application deadline for the Friday before that 8-2 work session. So that we at least have stopped.
Mhm.
And that's almost that's 3 weeks of applications. And then we'll use the work session on the 2nd to do the first round of interviews, and then we'll have to schedule sometime else in August to do the second round of interviews. We were thinking about, Katie and I discussed having it on the 9th of, nope, Sarah's a no for that one.
9th of August.
Yeah. Okay, well then we'll see if we can find another time for that meeting. And then if you continue to go down there, we'll have the discussion of who sits on the commission, pick our members on the 6th of September. And the 6th and the 20th, we're going to have recommendations, staff has recommendations. And we as a council have to discuss those recommendations before we give them. So we've set aside work session time on the 6th and the 20th for that. End of the month, they're seated and then they hopefully have their first meeting in October.
Is this one where we do give recommendations
Recommendations for what, David?
from the council to the commission or the advisory board?
My own suggestion would be no, and it kind of goes hand in hand with a conversation I was going to have about liaisons. There's no point in having a board if you're going to tell them what to do. So I think it has to flow up as opposed to down.
But I don't think there's a lot of things in there that are outdated that we need to give them a list of things.
Well,
like
that's
to
a different
do.
suggestion. If you
Yeah.
thought something was outdated and you'd like them to pay particular attention to something, that would not be a
Yeah, I don't think
recommendation.
I don't think anyone is suggesting that we're saying make a decision one way or another. It's just, this is an item you should, we'd
That-
like you to consider this is an item.
If
we'd
that
like
were
you
the
to consider.
case, then that would be appropriate to say, these are things we'd like you to take a look at.
Not
Madam Mayor,
limited to.
just for Council and for those folks listening, I think a lot of the things that we've identified so far are more technical in nature.
Yeah.
In terms of meeting start times, some of the language, it's very gender specific, changing a lot of that would be our recommendations, but certainly not the, I don't know, let's say more important, because I think those are pretty important, but those are just some ideas
Yeah.
and things that will come up with.
And the question for, I guess, is maybe Neil. So if we did just clean up the language and things of that nature, when we finish, it means the same thing that was already there.
Mhm.
Must that be voted on by the city?
Any substantive change, certainly. If it is more of a scrivener's issue where the concern is a gender description or something like that, something that doesn't change the substance of it, perhaps that can be avoided on some of it. Okay, we just have to look at what you're saying and what that means. But
And
if
you
it
can
were,
make that determination.
well, I can make
by
that
your
recommendation, yes. And then ultimately, again, if somebody wanted to challenge it, then we'd have a judge who would be looking over my shoulder and he or she would say, yes, or they would say, this is going to be, again, something that has to come before the voters. But if it doesn't change the substance of the plan, something like that can be done pretty simply. Substance of the charter, not the plan.
So I'm just going to ask that if there's a council member who has something that they'd like to recommend, a topic for the commission to consider, if you would submit that also within 2 weeks so that we have a list of those when we come in September, so that then we know what it is we're discussing.
And are we gonna have, will it be a requirement that the entire council or majority of council agrees on that topic before it goes to the citizens, to the crab? Or will it be just anything that is submitted will go to the crab?
It's really going to be hard for me to call him the crab the
I
whole
know.
time, but I'll get used to it. I would suggest that your power as a council member is not as a council member, it's as a council.
Yeah.
And so if something is going to them and with a suggestion on a topic, I would suggest that the appropriate way to do that would be to do it as a council. Now, that doesn't mean it has to be that way. That doesn't mean that you couldn't individually come up with what you thought was an appropriate topic for consideration and say, council has put their heads together. These are thoughts that we have. Take a look at these things. But the thing you always want to avoid is, again, influencing too much what or how. And that's the reason I say, if you did something, I would suggest it be as a council as opposed to as an individual.
And I would agree with Neil in that, because nothing precludes you as an individual council member writing to the commission and asking them to, or board, sorry, their board, and asking them about a particular topic as well.
And that's what I was gonna ask. There's nothing preventing us as an individual citizen of Webster Groves going before the CRAB and recommending or saying, hey, I really think the CRAB should look at this.
No, there would be nothing that would prohibit that.
I guess how difficult would that be for the general public to say Emerson said this, but he's part of the council? Is that a conflict of interest?
Well, again, it's giving them their due deference. And so again, if you appear before them and say, I'm not appearing as Emerson Smith council member, I'm appearing before you as Emerson Smith citizen, and this is something I'd like you to consider, it then is up to them. And, you know, again, these are people that are giving their time, and you have to make the assumption that they are going to, with integrity, make decisions and understand the spirit in which things are met and offered to them. So again, I think it's a safe thing to do. And, you know, again, it's a very transparent thing to do too, if you appear that way. I mean, there's no secrets about something going on behind closed doors. And we all know there are plenty of conspiracists out there who believe that sort of thing, right? So.
Well, and this is where I think form becomes so much more important than substance to some degree. I know I just said the opposite during the strategic plan.
I knew what you meant.
But hey, I'm a lawyer, so I can go back
Yeah,
and forth.
right. Okay, last thing on this, I just want to make a list so that we know if you would like to serve as the council liaison, speak now, or and this is a multiple right now that we're not going to decide who it is, but I just figured we should figure out who's interested.
I would love to.
I'm also interested.
I would defer to Emerson if he has interest.
Well, I'm also interested myself.
Oh,
So
I would
we'll
defer.
just, how about the three of us will have a conversation? How about that? We'll figure it out.
Was there any reason?
And then actually we'll talk and then we'll bring it to the council because it's a council decision, not our decision.
Right, right. But I do have one question though, in the introduction for the charter review. As they make the changes, can we think about having the CRAB team submit whatever they want to change? So we don't get a huge pile of changes at one.
Yeah,
time.
and I think, you know, one of the things that we can do that I don't think it needs to be in this introduction. Remember, part of the memo talks about, we want to give them information. Here's the scope of your work. Here are expectations. David found a really interesting kind of DEI lens that can be applied to this work. And one of the things we can do is ask them, you know, quarterly, will the chair come in or at least submit in writing for us where they are and what they're doing so that we just know. I mean, some of that's going to be the committee liaison job, but if they make formal decisions, I agree with you, because we could get a stack that's tiny and we could get a stack that's pretty darn big, and no one wants to be taken by surprise.
Right. And I guess I know there's a time frame to get it on the ballot. We have 90 days or something before.
Yeah. Yeah, we'd have to do it. The timeline that is set out here is appropriate to get it in by that April ballot.
Yeah,
And
so
that
we
was
don't
the
be
goal.
rushed into making a decision on a change. We might not get them all, but at least we have something to put forth.
And it's fine for us to attend these meetings as council members, even if we're not the liaison, even if it takes us over the quorum, right?
Mhm.
Because we're not making decisions there.
Right.
All right, my list of things we need to decide is finished. Are there any other comments? We have no board and commission assignments. Do you want to take a few minutes before we do the regular meeting? We do have a brief closed session after the regular meeting. Or do you want to just plow on through since it's a short agenda?
Let's power on through. I mean, my recommendation is power on through.
Anyone object?
No.
All right, then let's call our regular meeting to order. And when you are ready, call the roll.
Yes, Mayor Arnold,
Here.
Councilmember Bliss. Here. Councilmember Franklin.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Alexander.
Here.
Councilmember Richardson.
Here.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Here.
So, Mr. Buck, I know that you came up. You're just going to turn right back around and come on down. I don't even need the card to know that you're here for remarks of visitors.
Okay, Dave Buck, 124 South Elm. These are my remarks for the good of the community. I'm not a visitor. This shares a different perspective on your planning discussion, but the classic book, The Tipping Point, is about how little ideas can make a big difference. And I want to share one little idea which has totally amazed me multiple times to date. As preface, my mailbag letter in Friday's newspaper was about how positive mutual trust between citizens and city leaders is the cornerstone of a thriving community, which brings me to this little idea. As you know, city council's role is to sit quietly, sometimes stone-faced, and not respond to remarks such as this. They come and go. But I have seen Laura do something several times now that is new and different from anything that I have ever witnessed any city leader do in the 20 years that I've lived here. For certain citizens who have stood here and who have reached out for help or reaction or for comment, Laura's response as mayor has been, it is not customary for city council to respond to remarks, but if you will leave your name and information, I will contact you so we can sit down and have a talk on your issue. Remember that? That's happened at least 3 or 4 times so far. It has totally amazed me because it is totally different from the 20 years that I've lived here. To Laura's great credit, versus getting absolutely no feedback, think about how this makes our citizens feel and the positive message that it sends to other citizens like me. It is just one little idea. It's a little idea, but it makes such a big difference in building trust and faith in city governance and making our citizens feel valued, feeling good about themselves, and feeling part of something bigger than themselves. And I ask you, at the end of the day, and you've talked about strategic planning, at the end of the day, is there any higher purpose for city council and city staff? I don't think so. So in closing, the big ideas certainly matter, but please do not overlook the little ideas like we just talked about that can make a big difference in creating and shaping Webster's future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Dave. Remind me to pay you later. Just kidding for everyone on the recording. I'm just kidding.
Actually, payment going out's not the problem, coming in.
All right. Does anyone have any new business? Oh, wait, we didn't check. Is there anyone online who has a remark of visitor?
I think
Oh, yes. So come on down. Typically you fill out, I forgot to do the introduction. I apologize for that. Do we have cards there? We'll wait a minute for you. That's my fault. I forgot to read our whole nicely printed introduction about making remarks of visitors.
I don't know. I don't think anyone online. There's.
So that parliamentary procedure thing didn't do me so well so far. We'll keep working on it. So if you will just state your name for the record, as they
Yes.
say.
Sue Jolly Van Zant, 25-year resident of Webster. So I can launch in? Okay,
Please
that's
go
fine.
right ahead.
At the annual Community Days, 4th of July parade has always been an uplifting and fun community experience for me and my family. Since 2019, I've requested that our city provide reserved, easy to access parade viewing location for those with disabilities, but Webster has refused to do so. My multiple requests for this accommodation stem from my 87-year-old father-in-law who has physical disabilities. My entire family, including my father-in-law, attended Webster Groves Parade yesterday, the 2022 parade. Sadly, yesterday's Highland Park Parade shooting made me recognize that my family and I have always felt safe and secure when attending the parade. something I took for granted until now. My heart goes out to all of those affected by the Highland Park shooter. As I reflected on the horror of what happened in Highland Park, I realized that the shooter's actions should not deter me from continuing to ask our city to provide equitable and inclusive parade viewing seating arrangements for its residents and visitors. The ADA guarantees that people with disabilities have the same opportunities as everyone else to participate in mainstream American life. I believe that attending the 4th of July parade is an excellent example of American life, and that's why I'm here tonight. For background, since 2019, I've reached out to numerous council members via email. As a result, I've exchanged emails and had a brief face-to-face conversation with a council member who expressed support for my request. However, after 3 years, the outcome remains the same. No action by the city to treat residents and visitors with disabilities in an equitable manner by providing them with a reserved and easy to access space at its annual parade. Looking back at the city's response to my request as it unfold over time, in response to my initial 2019 request, the city sought an advisory opinion from the Department of Justice to ensure I assumed that it wasn't violating any regulations of the ADA. However, upon receiving the DOJ's opinion, which was simply because the city doesn't provide reserved seating for anyone, the city is not required to provide reserved seating for those with disabilities. But they took no action. They got the answer they sought. In 21 and 22, I made the same request. In response to my request this year, the city repeated the legalistic excuse that our community is under no legal obligation. The city's repeated use of this loophole is sadly ironic, given that its inclusion statement claims we are committed to promoting diversity, respectful conduct, and equitable service. We strive to be an inclusive place for all, and we condemn discrimination. If Webster Grove strives to be an inclusive place for all, can a city leader here today explain to me why the city manages the parade in a way that's not equitable or inclusive by not providing a designated reserved seating area for those with disabilities, while at the same time allowing people to reserve seating along a parade route? City doesn't publicly communicate how to have reserved seating for those with disabilities. Those are the two main points. Thank you.
Thank you. And at the risk of Dave's comments, I will give you a call and follow up. All right, so I don't miss anyone else. Are there other? Okay. Is there new business from mayor, council, city attorney, city manager? Emily, I would love to entertain a motion about the consent agenda.
Let me find the right one. Yes, Mayor. I would like to call for the approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
All right.
Councilmember Bliss?
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander?
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd?
Yes.
Mayor Arnold?
Yes. I believe, are you ready? You have highlights on your agenda, so I think. Pam?
Yes. Mayor, I'd like to call for an executive closed session related to number 1, attorney-client privilege communications, Missouri statute 610.021, open parens 1, closed parens. Number 3, personnel, Missouri statute 610.021, open parens 3, closed parens. And number 4, negotiated contract, Missouri statute 610.021, open parens 12, closed parens.
Second. Councilmember Franklin?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander?
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd?
Yes.
Mayor Arnold?
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss?
Yes.
All right, so that ends the public portion of our meeting. Thank you all for being with us, both online and here in the room. And if you'll excuse us, we now move to the closed session.